Hey everybody, it's me again. I want to talk a little bit now about transitions and about how we use transitions in the structure and organization of our writing. All right, so everybody's written so far. I've seen generally pretty good organization of your ideas overall. Some of y'all, need a little bit more work, but that's what we're here for. But what I want to talk about here is using what we call transitions, right? And which will help your writing to be much more accessible to your reader and will help with the flow of your writing. All right, so the first thing we want to do when we're doing our writing, transitions are going to be kind of towards the end. That's why I kind of saved this towards the end of the course because, this is a little bit more of a more, advanced kind of skill. I wanted you to just get comfortable writing again before we do this. All right, so if we look at this, this image that I've got here, what we're thinking about is transitioning between ideas, and it just transition means exactly what it sounds like. It's just transitioning between different ideas, moving between different ideas. So if we look at this, we're going to look at a structure of a 5 paragraph or a 5 or a paper that's been chunked up into main ideas. I think of it more as like gravity wells is what I try to think of, because not all the information is going to only be applicable in one place. And anyway. So if we think about the dark green here on this image, what we're looking at is generally a 5 paragraph or 5 chunk paper. So we have our introduction and our conclusion at the beginning and the end. Then we have these main ideas that we're going to work through, right? But what we want to do is to be able to move smoothly between these different sections of our writing or different ideas, and we want to find some way to kind of bring them together. And you can see I've got these arrows with these transitions, because what we want to do is to move smoothly, right? So if you've ever if you guys know how to drive a stick shift, you know that the point of getting familiar and comfortable with driving a stick shift is that you're not grinding the gears, right? So what we don't want is like that grinding or slamming of the gears. If we don't equate it to driving a car, what we want to be able to do is have that smooth transition between first, second, and third and fourth gear, right? We want to be able to move easily. It takes some time to learn how to feather that clutch, right? So that's what we're going to talk a little bit about here, is trying to put these transitions in so that we move between one idea to the other and get to our, the end of our paper in a smooth and effective way. All right. So what are transitions? What do they do? It reminds our readers, one thing that they can do is to say, in moving between different ideas, we want to remind what we just said. And then we're going to say, hey, well, I'm setting up this new idea, right? I don't want to just jump straight into it. That would be a little too brusque and a little too abrupt. So what I want to do is say, I just talked about this. Now I'm going to go and talk about this next thing. And sometimes it can be a little ham-fisted. It can be a little bit kind of overly, this is what I'm going to do. As you get a little bit better with your writing and your transitions get a little bit better, it'll be smoother. And you'll see this in your writing if you're looking for transitions in other people's writing. You'll see how it gets a little smoother. You're going to get a little bit better at it over time. And this always works really well, or works better with well-organized writing. So if you're going to just jump in at the last minute, you got a paper due at midnight, and you're going to start writing it at 11 o'clock at night, you're not going to have good transitions, because you've waited too long to even start the process. If you have really good structured, organized writing, if you've taken time to do it piece by piece, poco a poco, and you get to the end, you're going to start to see, okay, well, maybe I want to transition this a little bit better. How can I move from this one big idea to the next one? So right here, if I've got this first an example here, I've got these paragraphs to talk about how Venezuela's government is very, if I've got some ideas about how Venezuela's government is supposed to be democratically organized, and then I'm trying to move to say that, while the structure of the government is very democratic, however, right now it's not. I'm going to have points that are going to prove like their constitution is, provides for democratic elections and blah, 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 which seamless transition of power, just like we do in the States. And then I'm going to say, well, yeah, but the government isn't working as well as it should be. A good way to transition between that might be the sentence. Despite the previous arguments, there are many reasons to think that Venezuela's government is not as democratic as is suggested by its leaders. So this is where now I'm going to jump into trying to show why Venezuela's government isn't actually working as effectively and as democratically as it should, right? So I'm going from saying that it is supposed to be this way to saying that, showing why it's not. And I want that transition there to be able to say, hey, look, I'm going to move from one idea, kind of conflicting ideas. I don't want it to just be this hard, smash of a, jump cut. I don't want that. So that's why I need that transition there. All right, so when we think about words, phrases, and sentences that link together, so one of those might be similarities. So I might have one section where of a paper where I'm talking about something and I've got a kind of a different idea, but it's similar in some ways. I can say, in the same way that, or similarly to, why giraffes have spots is, zebras have their stripes to keep them from, being seen out on the savannah or something. I don't know what it is. We can also do the same thing with there's contrasting ideas as well, so on the other hand is another one. So, if we have one idea, on the other hand, I've got another completely different idea that I'm going to introduce now. All right. Another way that we can do transitions, and this might feel a little bit, a little simple, maybe is the word I'm looking for, is just to list it, right? So I'm going to tell you about 1, 2, 3, 4 things, right? That might be my introduction. I'm going to tell you about 1, 2, 3, 4 things. Not saying that, but I'm going to tell you about, and so my paragraph where I start to talk about that first thing, I might say, the first thing I'm going to talk about is, the first in that list that I put in the introduction, right? And then, when I get down to this next section, when I start talking about the second thing, if I'm going to talk about, I'm moving through the list that I set up in my introduction. That's going to at least tell my reader, okay, so I'm moving through a list of ideas, and at least I know that you've transitioned to the next idea, right? So that's another one. And then we also have time, right? So we can think temporally about that. We might say that, in the past we had, steam and locomotives were the main source of transportation. We could say, wow, before trains were important more recently, or nowadays, or in our current era, right now we rely more heavily on personal automobiles or something like that. So these are all different ways that you can use transitions to move between the organization of your writing. All right, so signposting. So this is an idea where this is kind of generally going to be a little bit more written, a little bit wordier probably. But this signpost is where if a signpost on the side of the road holds up a sign that says something is about to change, right? So it's like, hey, there's a you see the sign that says there's a stop signal ahead. So that signpost is giving you some bit of information. That's the way I like to think about it, right? So in this first example, in the following chapter, I will discuss the superiority of dark chocolate to milk chocolate, right? So I'm already telling my reader, hey, this is what we're going to talk about. And so your reader is already going, okay, so I understand what is going to be presented to me, and that's what I expect to read, and that's what you should be presenting to your information to your reader. Now, if you start talking about jawbreakers and bubble gum and all this other nonsense in this next chapter, you're not using this transition effectively because you're throwing your reader off, right? So that's why we need to have good organized writing. And then signposting can also tell your reader that you're about to give them a list of ideas, right? So here it says, my research into the benefits of salt water has uncovered the 3 main points that I will discuss in greater detail. I'm already setting up my paper here, right? I'm already telling you the 3 main ideas that I'm going to write to write about and to present information to the reader. Freshwater saltier than freshwater fish don't live well in saltwater, and saltwater taffy can't be made from lake water. So these are already the 3 main ideas, the 3 main subjects, the 3 main sections, the 3 main gravity wells, if you will, that I'm going to have in my paper. And that's telling my reader, be looking out for these, and when you see a new one, that's going to be a transition to a new idea, right? Does that make sense? All right, so here's some examples. So because of associated with peer-reviewed legislation, Upton Sinclair's novel became, for many historians and students, of a literary history of the exemplary instance of the literature as a means of reform. Many critics, however, see, we got that transition, right? We're saying many critics, however, so now we're like, oh, okay, so somebody else is going to say something. Regard the legislation as a misreading of the novel. So in this instance, I'm saying, well, like those people thought one thing over there. However, we're going to move over to this other thing over here because really I'm trying to show you what the reality is as opposed to what the people think it is. Okay. So in this next example, it's going to say the study was carried out in 2 stages. So automatically your reader is going, oh, okay, so I'm going to hear about 2 things, right? So in the first stage, that's a good transition because I'm saying, okay, now I'm going to talk, this next section, I'm going to talk about the first part of this study that we did. And then we're going to get down to this next paragraph. It's going to say in the second stage, right? So, so these are some ways that you can give your reader, transitions really are nothing more than verbal cues. You're telling your reader, your audience, you're saying, hey, I'm going to set this paper up in this certain way. I'm going to be very explicit about how I'm going to do it. And when you're going to know this transition, you're going to know the change between ideas because I'm going to cue you to them and I'm going to tell you. This is a really effective way of doing your writing, academic writing, or in really any kinds of writing, but particularly academic writing, because we want to be clear, we want to be explanatory. We don't want to make anything ever to be hard for our reader to understand, or else, why would we even be writing it? We want to be clear with our communication. I'm gonna have an activity for you guys to do about this, and I want you to use some transitions. Mainly, that's going to be the main focus of this activity that I'm going to ask you to do. Anyway, transitions aren't hard at all to do, and actually they become very easy to do, and they become almost necessary when your writing is good and well organized. And that's the most important thing, is to have well organized writing. So you need to do your planning, you need to use your organization before you get started. That's why procrastination is never going to be your friend. All right, talk to you guys later.